On this 2.7L EcoBoost F150, P0352 points us toward the coil-on-plug primary control side for cylinder 2. In plain language, the PCM may be seeing a problem in the coil control circuit, not just a weak spark event. The truck may misfire, run rough, or shut off fuel to that cylinder as part of catalyst protection. Broadly, the possible fault areas can include coil power, coil ground, the PCM driver circuit, connector fit or corrosion, the coil itself, and in some cases the spark plug. So the job here is to prove the circuit before condemning parts. Start by checking for the ignition coil primary or control code on the 2.7L path. Do not chase base ignition timing on this system. Timing is controlled by the PCM and is not adjustable. Before going deeper, tug on the suspect coil connector and make sure it is fully seated. If it is loose, reconnect it until you hear the click. Also keep the coil identification straight. Coil letters A through H line up with cylinders 1 through 8. If this P0352 path is present, continue into the coil circuit checks. If you are working a symptom with no code, use this same entry into the circuit checks. If you are outside that situation, do not force this path. Back up and choose the correct symptom-based direction. There is one place in the diagnostic flow where the entry into the Noid light check and the first spark check is not clearly tied back to the 2.7L route. If your earlier diagnostic path lands you there, follow it in order. If it does not, pause, recheck the earlier diagnostic path and avoid guessing. For that check, do not disconnect any coil-on-plug unit while the engine is running, because damage to the coil or PCM may occur. With the ignition off, disconnect the suspect coil, disable the fuel pump by removing the fuel pump fuse, and connect the deluxe Noid light and signal test light, set ASD 7898, or an equivalent between the COP and VPWR circuits at the suspect coil harness connector. Crank the engine and watch the Noid light. A consistent blink means the driver is being commanded, so move to the coil function check. If it does not blink consistently, go to the VPWR and circuit testing. For the coil function check, leave the ignition off and inspect the coil case and boot closely. Look for carbon tracking, cracks, torn boots, or a boot that is not installed correctly. Remove the suspect coil from the spark plug and connect the adjustable ignition spark tester THX 458 or an equivalent. Reconnect the suspect coil connector. Set the spark tester to 40 kV and crank the engine 3 times. Then set the tester to 25-28 kV and crank again while monitoring spark. The key point is that a correctly operating ignition system only needs to show spark in the 25-28 kV range. If spark is present at 25-28 kV while cranking, do not condemn the coil from this test. If spark is not present, install a new coil, install a new spark plug if needed, clear the PCM codes, and repeat the self-test. If the concern or code remains after that, go to the PCM operation check. Now get into the core circuit checks for P0352. Again, do not disconnect any coil-on-plug unit while the engine is running. With ignition off, disconnect the suspect coil connector. Then turn ignition on and check VPWR at pin 3 of the suspect coil connector. For VPWR verification, the setup also calls out a 12-volt non-powered test lamp, and the decision point in the circuit check is whether voltage is greater than 10.5V. If it is greater than 10.5V, move on to the coil ground circuit. If it is not greater than 10.5V, repair the open circuit, clear the PCM codes, and repeat the self-test. Next, with ignition off, check the suspect coil ground circuit at pin 2. If resistance is less than 5 ohms, continue to the driver circuit open check. If resistance is not less than 5 ohms, repair the open circuit, clear the PCM codes, and repeat the self-test. With ignition off, disconnect the PCM connector and the suspect coil connector. Then check the suspect coil driver circuit between the PCM connector and pin 1 at the suspect coil. If resistance is less than 5 ohms, the open circuit check passes and you move to the short to voltage check. If resistance is not less than 5 ohms, repair the open circuit, clear the PCM codes and repeat the self-test. For short to voltage, turn ignition on and measure voltage at pin 1 of the suspect coil connector. If any voltage is present, repair the short circuit, clear the PCM codes and repeat the self-test. If no voltage is present, continue to the short to ground check. With ignition off, measure resistance at pin 1. If resistance is greater than 10,000 ohms, move to the coil damage check. If resistance is not greater than 10,000 ohms, repair the short circuit, clear the PCM codes, and repeat the self-test. If the concern or code is still present after that repair path, continue to the coil damage check. Once the driver circuit checks have passed, reconnect the PCM connector and test the suspect coil with the adjustable ignition spark tester THX458 or an equivalent. Set the gap to 40 kV and crank the engine 3 times. Then set the gap to 25-28 kV, crank the engine, and monitor the tester. If spark is present at 25-28 kV while cranking, install a new spark plug if needed. Clear the PCM codes and repeat the self-test. If spark is not present at 25-28 kV, install a new coil, clear the PCM codes and repeat the self-test. If the concern or code is still present, move to the PCM operation check. For the PCM operation check, disconnect all PCM connectors and inspect them closely for pushed-out pins and corrosion. Reconnect all PCM connectors and make sure they seat correctly. Then verify whether the concern is still present. If the concern is still present after that connector inspection and reseating, install a new powertrain control module. If the concern is gone, the system is operating correctly at this time, and the fault may have been caused by a loose or corroded connector. Keep this verification separate from the circuit testing. After any repair, clear the PCM codes, repeat the self-test, and confirm P0352 stays gone. The clean way through P0352 is to prove power, ground, driver integrity, and coil output in order. Do not jump straight to a PCM or an injector diagnosis just because the cylinder is shut down. The PCM may be protecting the catalyst while this coil primary fault is active. For more diagnostic training, visit stepdiagnostics.com.